Hello, my name's Tim Burbage. Welcome to Tim Burbage Reads. And today I'm going to be doing a book review on my thoughts on Jonathan Strange and Mr Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I read this book, listened to this book, I should say. I did the whole thing on audio and I listened to it over September and October because it's a long book. It's big. What's it about? It's about two English magicians set in the Georgian period, kind of around the time of King George III, the beginning of the 19th century. I think the book takes place between 1806 and 1817 or something around that period. And English magic in this world, English magic used to exist and it used to be practiced. And then over time, the skills have been forgotten, and now it is more of an academic exercise. People studying books and commenting and critiquing on the literature of magic rather than practical magic. In walks Mr Norrell, who challenges the magical status quo and becomes a practical magician. And then later comes a man called Jonathan Strange, who becomes Mr Norrell's apprentice. Throughout the plot, there are series of dealings with the fairy realm is involved, and people talk a lot about fairy. Previously, the land of fairy was very much linked to England, and there were lots of dealings between the two realms. And in this book, those borders between the two realms kind of start to dissipate. Then there is also stuff happening in the real world. So, because this is kind of a fictional history, you still have Napoleon in France invading all of Europe, creating his empire. You still have the Duke of Wellington, who then goes, I want to use magic in warfare. And that happens, and both Strange and Norrell get involved, and they do it in their own ways. You also have, Lord Byron is wandering about, being an absolute cad. All of this is during the period where King George III is king. So all of this real world stuff is happening. But what if England had access to magic via a couple of people? Magic in this world is still incredibly rare. It is almost a theoretical exercise. And you see in other countries, Napoleon is scrambling to find a French magician to combat the English ones. And I would say that's about it from a plot perspective. The main draw here are the characters and the style that is delivered. And I'll go on the style first, because it is written as if it was of the time period. There is no modern language in here. You don't have any hobbits saying okay, like you did in the first Rings of Power series of the Rings of Power TV show. Everyone speaks as if it's the time period, and it is written as if it is from the time period. Both in terms of style and method of delivery and length. It's a long book. I think, you can get editions that are like 1,000 pages. It's crazy big, but it is written like Dickens, I would say. Obviously, it's pre-Dickens, but it's like Dickens and Jane Austen. It's that style of writing. And Susanna Clarke absolutely nails it. And it is the style of it is full of kind of witticisms and charm. And it's actually pretty funny in that kind of dry way. That one bit I remember is there's a butler called Stephen Black, and he goes, I'm used to experiencing unwanted guests in my master's home. I'm not used to experiencing unwanted rooms, because it's like a brand new room in the house that he's never seen before. And this is the kind of book where if you read it, if you bounce off the style, that's okay. I think that's fine, because not everybody likes reading stuff in that style. And if you're like, I've heard everyone say this book is really good, and it is really good, but I just can't vibe with this. Maybe if I read more, I'll get used to it, or it'll get better. Honestly, the style doesn't change throughout the book. So if you bounce off the style, That's fine. I completely get it. So the style, I think, is brilliant because it's so tremendously well executed. The other thing I think is fantastic are the characters. The characters of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell are incredibly interesting and so deep and three-dimensional. There are inherent contradictions there. They are completely believable. No one does anything purely for plot contrivance. That never happens in this book. There is no jumping the shark moment in this book. But one thing that is very strange is how Susanna Clarke spends time with the reader, showing them this world. Because it's called Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And you don't meet Jonathan Strange till, like, I don't know, halfway through the book. Mr. Norrell disappears for large portions of the book. It's not even like a half and half thing, like it was when I read The Prestige, which is about two magicians. But it spends time with its characters in a very strange way, and I could understand why someone would get a bit frustrated. And I did it a little bit at times, which was like, I want to get back to blah character because I find them really interesting. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell are not the most interesting characters in my opinion. The side characters, because the book is so big, you spend so much time with the side characters and you get to know them so well, and they go through their own arcs, really, really big arcs. Key standouts for me are Childermas, who is Norrell's manservant, basically his number two. I really enjoy Stephen Black, who is a butler for Lord Walpole, who is one of the ministers that kind of uses magic to elevate their political career. Those two are absolute standouts. There's also, someone called Vinculus, who is like a conjuring con man. He is someone who does tricks rather than magic. You know what I mean? On the streets of London. He's an incredibly interesting character. He only appears at a few points, but whenever he does, you can't stop reading about him. One thing that is from this time period is that magic and parliament and power is very much dominated by white gentlemen. So there's not a ton of lady characters. One of them is Lady Pole, who marries the politician, and the other one is Arabella, who marries Jonathan Strange. Mr. Norrell does not have a wife. If you're looking for something that's like a female empowerment, there's not much of that, if I'm being honest. But they are both incredibly interesting characters, and lots of interesting things happen to them. And as the story progresses, they take more and more control of their own lives, which is nice to read. How can you talk about this book? There's so much in this book. So many things happen, and so many things also don't happen. Because you spend time with these characters, and you could read whole sections, or I listened to whole chapters where nothing much happened, but it's just people talking, and it's just so interesting to live in this world that is told in such a great style with these characters who are so engaging. Someone went to a talk by Susanna Clarke, and she said she wrote it chronologically. She just started at the beginning, just went all the way through, and kind of didn't really know how it was going to end, and you could tell that, not because the plot doesn't go anywhere or it has a terrible ending, it doesn't, but because it is told in almost like a biography way of these two characters, Strange and Norrell, and what happens to them is told purely chronologically. There's very few things that would break the suspension of disbelief that you're reading a book. This could be real because it's told in such a way that all the magic is real. You know what I mean? But no, it's an outstanding book. I gave it 5 stars. One thing as well is that I was on a read-along, my first read-along, with Hardy's Books, with Lady Mayor Reads, with Rebecca Nicole, who have all done great videos on it, far better than this video is. And I got to participate in discussions. Campbell did it as well, and Andrew Watson, and lots of people. And some people are still reading it because it's a very big book. It's a very big book. I think Ross said this is his favourite book. I could completely see why, because what it wants to do, it executes incredibly well. And I really enjoyed what it was trying to do. The themes that are discussed here are about the rights of magic. There's a little bit, there's a bit about class. There's a bit about the North-South divide in England. It covers war. It covers the power of information and how information should be shared across people, but it isn't. It is controlled. Oh, just so interesting how Strange and Norrell are. You could say they're two sides of the same coin because they're both magicians, but it's not as if just one is good and one is bad. I think they're both completely fully rounded characters, and they both are good at some things and bad at other things. They're not opposites of each other, but they certainly have parts of their personalities that clash and the way they view the world. But it's not as if one is purely one way and one is purely the other. That's one thing that I think is great. I would say they're most similar to Hamilton and Burr from the show, in that one is much more patient and methodical, while the other is a bit more off the cuff and spontaneous. Certainly in how they approach magic, but also how they approach life and how they make decisions. And it doesn't show that one is good and one is bad. That is not the case at all. Both of them are equally good and bad. You could ask 2 people or 10 people who read the book which one they preferred more, and you'd get a different answer every time. Without getting into spoilers, and if I do talk about the plot, this video will be an hour long because it's a very long book. I really, really enjoyed this book. I really did. I wouldn't have got to it if it wasn't for the read-along, so thank you, Hardy's Books. The audiobook was very good. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm really pleased that I listened to it. It is very long. and there are moments where it's not like a thrill ride, you know, it's not a roller coaster. But there are moments that it feels like it, and there are moments that you could just sit and just live in the world and enjoy the slow pace of things happening, but things are still happening. Oh, such a good book. Anyway, yeah, I gave it 5 stars, and I really recommend you read it. But if you bounce off it, I think that's absolutely fine. If you do bounce off it, I would recommend the audiobook, because then you still get the content and you can just let the style of it wash over you. And it helps you get kind of integrated into this Regency world. Yeah, that's what I would say. And anyway, please give this video a like. Please subscribe. I'm getting close to 150 subscribers, which I think is amazing. So thank you very much, everyone who's here and everyone who's watching this video. I really appreciate you. And now that I've told you that I appreciate you, can you get out of my house?